Welcome back to Inside the Vault, Enterprise Bank's podcast series where we talk about items of interest to small business. For a long time now, we've been talking about the implications that certain public policy proposals and laws have on the economy, on small business, and even on individuals. We've touched on the subject of taxation many times in the past, but have an opportunity now to revisit that again with the current administration's latest budget proposals, which call for sweeping tax changes. When I say tax changes, really tax increases that are expected, if enacted, to generate $5.5 trillion in new tax revenue to the government over the next decade, with the idea that those revenues will bring down the federal deficit and also allow for additional government spending. So what we're going to talk about today is what some of these proposals are, what some of the implications are, and then some of the disconnect between what these proposals stated intentions are versus their actual ramifications. With me again, I have Chuck Lai, President and CEO of Enterprise Bank, who in addition to being at the helm of the bank for, 25 years now we're coming up on.
Something like that.
Yeah, is also a tax accountant by trade and spent 30 plus years in public accounting, specializing in tax. So I think you know a little bit about tax structures in this country historically.
Little.
Okay, so let me kind of set the groundwork here, and then we'll go through some of these proposals one by one. So what we're talking about, as I said, is kind of a sweeping tax changes and tax increases, which appear to be primarily focused on wealthier individuals and businesses. We're talking about increases in the capital gains tax, which are going to be fairly significant if enacted, the personal tax rate, the corporate income tax rate, Medicare tax rate, even lesser known taxes like the stock buyback tax, and closing some current loopholes that are in the tax code for some different reasons. But let's start, Chuck, with the tax that is near and dear to all of us, which is the individual tax rate, the consumer tax rate. So right now, for 2022, those taxes range anywhere from 10% for the lowest income segment, lowest wage earners, up to 37% at the top tax bracket. So the proposal here is, I think, keep all of the tax rates on the lower end of the brackets and lower end of the income stable, but to increase the top tax bracket from 37 to 39.6. And 39.6 seems to be a magic number for the feds these days, which we'll talk about with a couple of these other proposals as well. But this is all being done under the guise of fair share. We hear that terminology from the administration all the time about folks paying their fair share. So, thoughts?
When I was raised, fair was equated to terminology equal. And when I work my butt off, and I'm lucky and blessed, and pay 3 times plus more than the person who isn't making a whole lot of money, I don't equate that as fair. It's unfair, and it's unfair towards the person making the more money. Fair would be if we all paid 10%. So as far as I'm concerned, that's just a political gross manipulation of the truth. Now, you may well believe, and I think there's a founding principle in the country, that people doing better pay a little more than what the people that aren't doing as well. There's already a charitable concept that's built into the rates when they're not a flat across the board the same number. That's fair. That's as fair can get. So whether you believe, and I happen to believe if I'm doing well, I can pay more than my fair share, to be honest with you. And I think that's okay. I mean, I've been very blessed and lucky to be where I'm at and to have the successes I had. I certainly have worked very hard for it, but I don't live a huge lifestyle, and I don't mind paying more than what somebody who's having a rough time. I don't mind helping somebody out. I think that's a good way, a good concept to have in place. But when my politicians sit there and say, I want that inequitable situation to get even greater, and use the terminology fair share to do it, I think it's disgusting. It certainly is a lie.
Yeah. How do you really think, Chuck?
Nobody's ever accused me of not saying what I feel.
Well, let me play devil's advocate here. So, the rhetoric oftentimes is, wealthy people are able to take advantage of the tax code, whether you call them loopholes or incentives. The funny thing to me is this is the same government that put these provisions and these incentives to drive activities in place that now they're criticizing people for using.
Right. One of the concepts behind the tax code is to motivate the population to do certain things. So if you want oil wells to be drilled, you put in intangible drilling cost treatment, which allows somebody to expense the cost of the well, even if it's successful, instead of writing it off over a period of time and matching the income and the expense. It's a huge incentive. And Congress put it in the tax code to incentivize drilling, to cause the private sector to invest. Well, if you've decided nowadays we don't want that incentive anymore, well, get rid of it. Don't run around because some wealthy person actually used the incentive that you still haven't put into the tax code, and by doing so reduces their taxes to zero. That's not. You don't create or fix a wrong by doing another wrong. In this case, what we're doing, you may believe that you shouldn't be giving this incentive away. Okay, we're going to get rid of the incentive. Instead, you leave the incentive in, and then you go and you say the person doesn't pay their fair share, so let's tax them heavier. Well, what about the people that worked hard who didn't do the intangible drilling costs? They get hurt a lot. Every time you try to fix a wrong by creating a second wrong, you don't make things better, you make them twice as bad, and it has a rippling effect many times over. Do you think the fella or gal that makes a lot of money that doesn't take those incentives and really is paying 37% as compared to the person who hasn't done as well, is only paying 10%, how do you think they feel when the administration says, you didn't pay your fair share, therefore I want you to pay even more?
It's just amazing to me that, and again, it's, weaponizing all these issues politically based on what party enacted what and what party is in power at a certain time. But it's just amazing to me that one side of the government can put these provisions in place and another part of the government tries to destroy them or
what you'd like
them.
to see is when you like to see things be fair. You like to have full disclosure. I mean, if you feel, somebody that's making a lot of money should basically pay 40%, somebody that's not pay 10%, okay, just say that, and that's what it is. But inserting and saying it's unfair, or taking a couple of examples where somebody would normally be paying 40% and now it's